Mr. Sunak, the Prime Minister, is complaining that the country is descending into mob rule and that he's going to crack down on protests, whatever it requires to protect our democracy, he says. And he had a meeting today when he told police chiefs that they had to demonstrate, they would use the powers they already have because it's vital for maintaining public confidence in the police. There's a growing consensus that mob rule is replacing democratic rule, and we've got to collectively, all of us, change that urgently. Well, I hope he's going to put his own house in order. That's the House of Commons. Because the House of Commons has degenerated into a place where we heard it very clearly today, where baying mobs of ministers and MPs are shouting slogans rather than listening to intelligent debate. And we have to do whatever it requires to protect our democracy and our values that we hold dear. Well, then it needs to start from the top. We need to see considered debate rather than point scoring by who's got the loudest slogan. This demonstration of intolerance is bred from the top. The fish smells from the head. That's an expression which goes all the way back to Greece and Turkey. It's an expression which particularly comes from Eastern Europe, but it could as easily be used here today. And it's really important that this isn't simply passed down and then seen as a way for crowd control. If it doesn't start from the top, if the improvement isn't at the top, I don't see that it can possibly be passed down. It is appalling that Parliament is being closed down, or the Tower Bridge is being closed down because of aggressive protests. But the example is there in the Prime Minister's own example, in his own behaviour, where he won't listen to what the leader of the opposition is asking. He's already got his script prepared and his slogans ready to chant back. And his supporters bay in mob-like approval. He can talk about the aggressive mob of pro-Gaza protesters at the home of Tobias Ellwood. Appalling. But all he has to do is turn around and look back at his own backbenchers, thumping the wood. This is chaotic. This is angry. This is appalling. And Sir Lindsay Hoyle is pressured to the extent that he rips up the parliamentary rule book, and today looks as if he's planning an exit. He looks as if he's barely present in the chamber. He looks as if he's intimidated. He talks about threats against MPs. What about the threats that MPs appear to have made against him? He is a dead man walking, effectively. He is a parliamentarian whose parliamentary career has been curtailed by threats and by intimidation. And the Prime Minister is talking about intimidation and expecting the police to play it heavy. The Justice Minister, Mark Freer, has started to wear a stab vest at public events. He's going to stand down at the next general election because he doesn't feel safe. The measures that the Prime Minister is putting forward wouldn't actually get to the root cause. The root cause is the example that is set, the example that is given. And The example that is given by Parliament is that the way to win an argument is to shout louder. This is the example that is then carried out by people like Tommy Robinson and his supporters. Tommy Robinson cited in Parliament today. Actually, when you look at Tommy Robinson, he's quite mild. Pro-Palestinian supporters. Actually, most of them are quite mild. The real problem, the real example of thuggery is demonstrated today in Prime Minister's questions. And yet James cleverly talks about threats to MPs and families. But what has provoked this? What has provoked this is the appalling behaviour of MPs in the mother of all parliaments. It's the mother of all examples. Of course MPs should be given greater police protection. Of course they should. And that should continue for as long as they feel anxious. But what has inspired that anxiety? And yet at the same time, we're told Prince Harry doesn't merit that protection. And yet Prince Harry was targeted by the Taliban and presumably is still on a list of potential targets. And yet our ministers think he doesn't deserve security. They do when they're rabble-rousing themselves with the Rochdale by-election coming up and controversial figures like George Galloway thrashing around. Well, actually, George Galloway is fairly mild. Mr. Freer, who represents a constituency, a large Jewish constituency in Finchley and Golders Green, and yet, he's somebody. His constituency office was firebombed. We think. Actually, it went up in flames anyway. Intimidating behaviour, of course. And I'm not saying that the MPs have brought it on themselves. I'm saying they are setting an appalling example. And it's very difficult when you've got MPs baying like caterwauling dogs to say, "Oh, you shouldn't be shouting. You shouldn't be." Actually, the very word protest, to protest means to shout. So to have a silent protest is an oxymoron. The word protest means to shout. A Protestant is somebody who shouts. Generally, they're shouting the word of God at a street corner. In some countries, you can get arrested for that. But shouting comes with the territory of protesting. And if you want to set an example, then you have to set the example of protesting in a more interesting, a more creative way. You need to take the advice of Yulia Navalnaya this morning. Be creative with your protest. Be creative with your challenges to the thuggish rule of law, because that's what it's becoming. And now the Prime Minister is saying, silence people. How is that possible? How is that possible? We want to behave within the law. We want to behave with decency, but we have to see decency as an example. We have to see the mother of all Parliament leading by example. It can't be one rule for them and another rule for us. Of course, we have to ensure that ministers and statesmen and women are safe. Of course we do. But they have to play their part in demonstrating that the proper way to behave is to be civilized. not to be screaming. And this sloganizing needs to stop. We need to be engaged in proper debate, not only in the House of Commons, not only in Parliament itself, but also in the interviews which politicians give, in the whether these are in the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, or on the news stations and the new media like GB News and Talk TV. We need a level of debate. We need to inspire debate and inspire a more peaceful, a more secure future.